In today's show, we discuss, does freedom of speech mean you can say anything?
And now, the TNT Talk Show, daring to go where other podcasts fear to tread.
Hello, I'm Tony Fasulo, and I share the stage with my esteemed friend and colleague, Tayo Boya. Tayo, hello, my friend. I hope you are keeping safe and well.
Yeah, what the hell?
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't sound like you are, pal. Sorry.
I'm still recovering from COVID. I'm all right, though. I'm
That's
okay.
good.
But if I have to cough, we can pause. Our audience will understand.
Yes.
But how are you? I know you said, come on, tell me. How you feeling?
Yeah, just the slow march into the grave just continues, doesn't it?
Good grief. How to bring
Maybe
a
not
good
so
man
slow,
down.
actually. Maybe accelerating into a gentle canter at this stage.
Oh no, you're so negative. Come on, be upbeat. I'm going to say hi to our audience. Hi, audience. Welcome back to the shenanigans of the show.
Oh God.
Anyway, let's move on with the show. In today's show, we discuss, does freedom of speech mean you can actually say anything you want? Now, obviously, Tayo, this is something close to your heart. So
Absolutely.
do you want to kick things off?
I would say the answer to that question is a resounding yes. However, there is a caveat. Can you say anything you want that's illegal? Because it has to be legal. You can't say something that's illegal. You can't say, I have freedom of speech. And then you go onto the streets and say, everyone listen to me. Let's gather up cudgels and batons and other dangerous weapons and set about the errant female population because they annoy me. You can't do that. That is inciting riot. That is inciting. That is affray. I believe if you actually start acting on it, that is affray and riot. And just merely calling for it is inciting. Some people are actually in prison for that in America now, aren't they?
I believe so, yeah.
About the June, was it the January 6th thingy for just calling for people to riot, because that's actually against the law. So
well, it is.
I'm not saying nothing that's illegal. I'm not saying that things which we have deemed to be illegal. I'm not that much of a libertarian. I do understand that there have to be laws, but by and large, if it's not illegal, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to say it.
So you're of the opinion that someone could say, my opinion is I'm a racist and I hate all races, apart from white Caucasians, for instance. So
very important that they should be able to say that. It's extremely important. First of all, it lets us know who's who and what's what, so they're not hiding it. Secondly, it lets people vent. And when they're venting, you can sit down with, not everyone, but with a surprising number of people, you can sit down and speak to them and you work out, by conversation, work out a new norm. I mean, one of the best instances of this is a Ku Klux Klan Grand Wizard who sat down with a black writer to explain his position. And over a course of time, speaking to this black writer, he actually thought, yeah, you got a good point here. You got many good points. And he left the Klan. Now, that's only because he wasn't hiding it. It wasn't suppressed. This is my problem, that there's a seething majority, a seething mass of Britons who hate immigration and hate what's going on, and they can't get the word there because politicians and society is stifling what they have to say. That's not making the emotions go away. That's making the emotions grow stronger and stronger and stronger until a demagogue who doesn't care and is immoral and knows exactly what he's doing, stands up. I don't know why I said he, maybe it's a she, I don't know. Stands up and talks and harnesses that seething anger And then you know who I'm going to mention, because he did it back in the 20s and 30s in Germany. He harnessed that emotion. And that's just because you were suppressing it. You can't go around suppressing people's emotions. They got to let these things out, air them, because what is it that we always say as a metaphor? Sunlight kills germs. And in the same way, it's the sunlight of publicity, of airing these things, of publishing these things. That's what gives them the air. That's what allows allows us to shine light onto what this person is thinking, and to maybe, hopefully, intervene and steer them properly.
But do you not understand that there are some sections of individuals, I won't say society, but there's individuals out there who can't quite be reasoned?
Absolutely.
Once they've got an ideological view, that it's almost embedded in, that can no longer be shifted.
Yes, but unless you agree to commit genocide, which I think you are against from our previous discussions, unless you agree to genocide, there's nothing you can do about it, because they will meet underground. They will meet one another. These ideas are there. It's just they are hollowed out in places like Telegram, which I've just pulled out of thin air, because I happen to know that Telegram is supposed to be unregulated and well encrypted. So I'm not actually accusing Telegram of harboring this type of people. I'm just using it as an example. There are spaces where you and I won't be able to enter, because we're not one of the crowd. And that doesn't mean that you've done anything. All you've managed to do is push these people underground, and we have no idea how virulent the problem is. It's like the Islamic Islamists, the fanatics.
ISIS.
Well, yeah, them, that crowd. I mean, well done to the security services who somehow have been able to infiltrate these people. I don't know how they managed that, but there are still sections of them where we don't know anything is going to happen until it happens. But if they allowed people to air their opinions, we would know who they were, and B, would be able to sit down and say, to them, is this really such a great idea? What's the thing you're practicing, and what you're saying? How good an idea is it? And you battle ideas with ideas, not with the gun, in my opinion.
I mean, you're absolutely right.
Well,
in an ideal scenario, totally correct. That's when you're dealing with reasonable people. However, when you have the platforms that we have today, which social media particularly gives everybody a voice, anyone that before had an opinion, they could shout it out in their street, and the people within their street could hear it. Now, with the advent of social media, the reach that someone has is so much larger. And this is the worry, because it's no longer I can shout on my street corner and I can be shouted down if I'm saying something that my fellow people disagree with. Then you can have a debate and keep it at that level. That's fine. I've vented. People around me have voiced their opinion. They don't like what I'm saying, and we can have that discussion locally. It hasn't spread like a virus. The problem with social media is there has to be some sort of curve, because anyone can say something that is taken the wrong way, and it can spread. You're no longer just affecting a local group. You've now got this viral situation that can infect the whole region or even the whole planet within seconds. And this is where the problem lies. How do you administer and manage this new phenomenon, which is social media, that allows anyone a platform far, far greater than they ever would have had? So if we were to get a Hitler again now, someone who was passionate about their cause, had a certain angst against a demographic of people based on some stupid reasoning, they would get a platform, and in a free speech society, they could use the words in such a way that didn't break the law, but allowed them to influence a greater number of people than they would otherwise. And that then means you're causing a problem for the authorities and society at large. So you've now given this individual, in quotes, the freedom of speech, but they're using that freedom of speech to affect too big a group of people, which then has a negative effect on society as a whole. And this is the problem. It's a juggling act. There's no black and white. You can't say freedom of speech means people can say everything. You've got this line. I've mentioned it on previous shows. You've got 0 at one end where people can't say a thing. You've got 100% at the other end where people can say anything, and I mean anything. Where the line has to be, it has to be probably around about the 80 mark. So they can say a lot of stuff, but there's some things that are slightly out of bounds. And this is where society has this balancing act, where some societies, they move that marker closer to the 100. Some choose to move it further down. So it oppresses people's freedom of speech. It's this juggling act. It's this scale of grey. Nobody's got it right, but then nobody's got it totally wrong either. But it depends on the society and what the society will tolerate.
You said so many things there which are truly horrific.
Oh.
First of all, the factually, I don't know if I can say factually. Can I say objectively? Let's test it, and then we'll see whether it's factual and objective.
Okay.
You said no one has got it wrong. I think the North Koreans have got it wrong because you can't say diddly squat there, man. That's I think the North Koreans have got it very wrong. Yeah, and I think from the point of view of what you were saying, what is truly horrifying is when you say that not everybody is reasonable. Do you know that when you and I are talking, there are many times when I don't think you're being reasonable. And I'm sure there are many times when I'm speaking when you don't think I'm being reasonable, especially when I talk about the guillotine and things like that.
Indeed, every day, Kaya,
right.
Every day.
well, yes, but seriously, the point is that I too think that you're not being reasonable. And I don't know how you feel about it if I was the one in control of what you're allowed to say and not say on social media. I mean, you're lucky because I believe in free speech. So actually, I'll let you say whatever the hell you want to say. But I'd hate for you to be in charge of my social media presence. Not that you aren't in a way, because you are from what you're saying, you are as woke as the people who are currently stifling me on Facebook and on YouTube, where frankly I've been banned twice now on Facebook for just expressing my opinion. In the case of Facebook, on the second time, I was just saying what I feel about Americans. Now, I wasn't calling anybody to go and kill Americans. I was just saying I think Americans are just America itself is a really bad country, which has done really bad things for almost the entirety of its existence. And I think I should be able to say that. I don't think that's something that should get me banned on Facebook, which is ridiculous. And the first thing I said was to say to somebody, I called him Alt Bratwurst, which means old sausage, because he's a Remoner, which is a Remainer, somebody who is against Brexit. And so why don't you then naff off to Germany then, Alt Bratwurst? And apparently that was enough to get me banned on Facebook. So I don't know what the heck is going on.
You
it's like,
actually insulted him.
Yeah, whatever. Alt Bratwurst is we're adults. Other people say to me, much worse things. But I grew up where sticks and stones could break my bones, but words could never hurt me. I grew up like that. So I'm not a baby. I don't run off to Facebook and report these people. If they're making, see, I don't mind being abused, but I won't stand for people making stupid points. So if somebody makes a
can I interject very quickly?
I really wish you wouldn't, because you went on for like 2 or 3. Let me just finish this and then I'll let you.
Go on then.
I'll do what the button is there for. I'll just block the person. Done. Finish. Block the person. What are you going to say?
You said something there, which is a thing. Sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That's, everybody seems to know that across generations, across societies. That's actually totally incorrect. Did you know that? Because when you ask somebody, most kids growing up, they've broken a bone, they've fallen, whacked their head. and you ask them, do you remember that? Oh, yeah, I've got a scar, vaguely remember it. But if you tell a child a cutting remark, a school teacher says something where they're chastised, those kids bring that into adulthood. So words are way more powerful than sticks and stones, because words can haunt you for the rest of your life. So the way we say things, not necessarily what we say, the way we say it has such a bearing. Because if you have a gripe like you had with this gentleman, who I'm assuming it's a gentleman, you
Yes.
called him an old sausage in German, he may not have understood that. I don't know. He may have taken that as a personal insult at him. And that's where the argument, if you were having a discussion, is lost, because you didn't need to resort to personal insults. You could have just kept it at a high level and insulted his speech, his actions, his viewpoint. But because you then resorted to throwing mud at him as an individual, then you crossed the line. And this is where we're going to talk about this, whether criticism and abuse are interchangeable, where criticism is valuable, but abuse is not. Criticism.
Okay, not going to that. Not going to that. First of all, if that was in English, I could have said something like this: "Listen, old bean."
Yes.
And I've actually said old bean, and that's how I meant it, by the way.
Okay. Well,
so I meant it like that. Old bratwurst, just old sausage. I was just trying to be German about it because I didn't know what old bean is in German, and I didn't think it would make any sense. So I just said old bratwurst. And I actually pointed it out when I was writing my rebuttal to Facebook that, look, if I was in English and I said, why don't you just naff off to the continent then, old bean? No one would have said anything. Just substitute it in your head. That's number one. Number two, when you talk about cutting remarks, really cutting deep and harming or hurting people, do you know something? Life can be like that, Tony. Now, a teacher shouldn't be doing that to a student, because there's a question of who's in authority and who is in a subservient position. So professionally, I mean, I was a teacher, and I was trained to not insult my students or make remarks that would harm them. And I think that is true of people in that profession. I think if you went to see your doctor and he looked at you and examined you and said, do you know something? You're a fat slob and you're smoking and you deserve to die. I think people would say, hey, that might be free speech, but my goodness, man, that's no good, because you're in a position of authority here. So you actually went to a very specific case of which I would say, no, that's not what we're talking about, because the reference there is to people in authority speaking down to people who aren't co-equal on that platform. Yes, words can hurt. We've mentioned one person already whose words hurt millions of people.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible. But then again, I did start by saying, we've learned from this as a society, and we have actually made laws, and we've put laws in place to mitigate against that. So that's how I started. I said, as long as it's legal, lawful speech, and I stand by that. But where you worry me a lot is that if you abrogate onto yourself the distinct idea that you know who's sensible and who isn't, and I contest that.
I never said that.
Yeah, well, no, you do, because you implied. If you're saying we stop this, only sensible people should be allowed to make comments, because I thought, excuse me, you said, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you say that the trouble with social media nowadays is that it's got this powerful reach where ideas can get out of hand, and if the wrong idea gets out, well, who tells it's the wrong idea? Who are you to say what's the wrong idea, what's the right idea?
Right. Let me give something about social media.
The other thing, sorry?
Social media, though. This is the thing. The platforms are, in the name of the word, social. They were designed for you to meet up with friends online, to chat about stuff, not as a broadcast for inflammatory voices. It's morphed into a bit of that, but that's not what its primary purpose was. So the people behind the scenes have got a business to run. They want to earn money, and they're earning money by people interacting socially and then seeing adverts, and they generate an income and they have a business model. It wasn't a platform saying online platform for free speech. No one's come up with a platform that specifically says that. These are all platforms for social gatherings, not necessarily to be there, a platform to put ideological speech or political speech. These platforms can accommodate it to a degree because that's how they've morphed into, but then that wasn't their primary reason for existing. So they're being a bit, hang on, you're breaking our business model here if you're speaking in a way that we don't like. So we've made an assumption that social media means, oh yeah, we have free speech on here. No, not necessarily.
All right. So first of all, if that's what they're really saying, and by the way, I really am calling for this. I think Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube should actually be taken into public ownership. I think we've gone way past where we should be allowed to be in the private hands now. It's too powerful. In the same way that you wouldn't let the road networks in the UK or in any country be, completely privatized. I know the Americans are going to go for a lot of toll booths and things. But everywhere else in sensible countries, nobody's thinking that the road should be privatized. Yeah. I know, and I think we've gone way past where we should be having this discussion. I don't even know why our government, the UK government, isn't even just privatizing sections of it, which just the part that operates in the UK should just be owned by the UK public. End of story. Just be a public corporation, nothing to do with private hands. It's too powerful to be in private hands. How on earth could Twitter? You're talking about people being inflammatory. You don't. I mean, this is because of your outlook on life. You don't like Donald Trump, so you had no issue with Donald Trump being banned by Twitter.
I have no issue with Donald Trump.
I have a huge issue with Donald Trump being banned, but the Taliban not being banned. I have humongous issues with that. And the point is that we can't afford to let these platforms I don't know who's on the planet who doesn't know that Twitter is as woke as hell. And if you're spouting woke nonsense, you can say virtually anything you want on Twitter. If you're a conservative, you probably get banned instantly. Like I've been banned just by asking a few questions. Like, is this really sensible? Talking about the identity politics. I was suspended. Why? For what? For asking questions? No. Listen, you can't have it both ways. You never know who is going to end up at the helm of affairs if you say it is okay for people to curtail other people's freedom of speech. And when you say that it's that these are private companies and they don't necessarily have to offer freedom of speech. I don't know. I mean, I know where you work. I don't want to mention it on air, but I think you go into your office, you have reasonable expectation that you could say what you wanted to say, as opposed to some topics which are curtailed or prohibited from speech, such as sport. It's possible because I know where in some places I've worked, people get very, very excited about football. Football of all things.
Yeah.
So the office policy was, you know what, we don't discuss sport, politics, or religion. Just because inside the premises, on the premises, you can talk about, you can go out for a smoke and stand on the road and say anything you want. You wouldn't expect your colleagues or your employer, exactly. You wouldn't expect your employer to lean out of the window, listen to you, spouting your philosophy on the street, so to speak, and then go, oh, we don't like what he's saying. You wouldn't expect that.
Well, actually,
and yet that's happening.
Actually, that is happening. That happens now. But
exactly.
The thing is, if you represent a company,
they don't represent a company. I know your company. You don't represent it, do you?
No, I know, I don't. But
exactly.
But
so
it's
why
association.
Would your company,
and they don't like
what association? Who
Honestly,
associates? How would
honestly.
I take what you are saying, Tony? How can I then make it the place you work? What's it got to do? What the heck has it got to do with where
I
you're
totally
working?
agree with you. I am totally in agreement with you. I
But
personally
it
think
doesn't sound, you say, every time you say you agree with me, I wonder what you mean by agreement, because it
No.
always sounds like you're opposing what I've just finished saying.
No, I'm actually agreeing with you in that respect, because the company, when you're on their premises, they're allowed to set rules because it's their premises.
Yes.
And you're working for them. But once you've left the building, you should be free to do what you want. However,
Here we go.
there's an association. And this is the problem.
I just said there isn't an association, and you said you agree with me.
I do, but they think there's an association. I'm not saying there's an association. They believe it's an association. So they don't want their reputation damaged. Let's say, for instance, argument's sake, right? A politician, right? Politician in the House of Commons does their own thing, they do what they want, blah, blah, blah. What happens when they do in their private life? Who recently, there was an MP in his private life, was discovered that he was doing some really wacky things. That's got nothing to do with him being an MP.
Oh, pray tell. Wait, now I'm intrigued. What were the wacky things he was doing?
Who was it? I don't
know.
Want to name him, but it was someone in the Conservative government, not in the government itself, but he was quite a prominent MP, was having not an affair, but he was having bondage sessions outside of his marital home.
Oh, I completely missed that. Okay.
Yeah, he was an MP. I don't want to name him.
I wish you would, because it will save me having to Google it.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I don't really care.
He was head of some of these, you're not necessarily in the executive or front bencher, but he was important.
A committee.
Correct. And he ran a committee that raised questions about certain things. But he was stripped of that because of his private life. Now, in what you're saying, there should be no link. What he does is in private, it's up to him.
Hold on.
Right.
No. Hold on. What committee? What committee? If it was a committee on the economy, on banking, on this or that,
it had nothing to do with his private life or what he got up to.
I wouldn't mind. But if it was for family affairs or gender, something or the other, I'd be like, I don't know, but if I want that guy heading it. Just as
I don't believe it was that.
Well, then in that case, I don't know why they.
Because it didn't sit right, and that's the problem. Where do you draw the distinction?
Well, where I draw the distinction is where I draw the distinction is if it doesn't impact the guy's work, it's got nothing to do with anybody. If it doesn't impact on his work, then it's got nothing to do with anyone, what it does in his private.
People are emotional people. Straight away, if imagine you had to vote for somebody, right? He's a great MP. He stands by what he does. He's brilliant at speaking his point. He's great at representing me. But I've just discovered that he had 5 women on the go in his private life.
Oh wow, that makes him a fantastic administrator.
Well,
vote for him straight away. The guy knows what he's doing, man.
Well, you see, it's horses for courses. It's how certain people will view him, and so unless he was squeaky clean, he stands as in a view for the majority of people. He's upstanding. He's great. He'll get my vote. But as soon as there's something that tarnishes that image, people are affected, and they think,
well, I think we've digressed a bit.
So yes, in an ideal world, there shouldn't be an association, but we're human beings. We make opinions on people, and this is the problem.
There's no we about it. Please don't include me in that section.
Okay, I'm talking we as a society, right? I'm not saying individuals. I'm talking as a society. Generally, the trend is you make an opinion based on certain factors. It's just an instinct. You see someone coming towards you, you've never seen them before, and they've got something behind their back. Naturally, you're going to be suspicious and think, he looks a little bit aggressive. What's he doing? And it's a protection thing. Yeah, Tony.
Tony
it's
the
just
knife.
An instinct. It's part of our survival mechanism. So we make an opinion on somebody very, very quickly. I do an experiment as part of one of my trainings, which I do exactly this, where I show a picture to my audience when we do a training session, and it's only on the screen for literally a second. And then I ask the audience, just based on that picture, what do you see? And I get all sorts of things come out. Oh, he looks aggressive. He looks someone who has just had a bad day. And people have made an opinion on an image that was only on the screen for a second. They
When
know
you say
nothing.
people, is it both genders?
Yes, a mixed audience. Yeah, absolutely.
Have you ever taken any notice of what kind of comments you get from which kind of gender?
I get all sorts of comments, yes. And I do make notes because I use that as part of my ongoing training.
I'd love to be present during.
Yes, I'll invite you to the next training that I do.
I have my suspicions, as you know.
Well, indeed, there are demographic differences. Absolutely, there are. And you get certain stereotypical viewpoints from one gender and another gender. Absolutely. But that's an instinctive thing. But going back, I don't want to go too far off point here, but bringing it back to the association part, when someone is in the public eye, if you then associate them with something negative, this is what the press do. They want to bring somebody down they don't like, they will dig up dirt about them. And even though it has nothing to do with what that individual is trying to get across their message, their opinion, their view is being tarnished by the media or by some other organization to bring that person down. And it happens in America. We see it in the clergy. You see it in the States all the time, where you've got these clergy who come on to their parishioners and they have to apologize because they were having an extramarital affair. And
well, clergy shouldn't be doing that anyway. I mean,
well, indeed, but this is what happens.
No, I mean, it's not the same thing. What I'm trying to say.
They had a gambling problem. This happens too.
Well, gambling is one thing for a clergyman, but an can't have an extramarital because I'm a Catholic. Well, I used to be a Catholic. So for me, if you're in the clergy, you're not married. I mean, you're married to God, aren't you, or something, or Jesus?
For a Catholic, yes. Not if you're a Protestant
I was just talking to some friends of mine not so long ago, and I've still got that Catholic upbringing thing in me, and that if you're not a Catholic, as far as I'm concerned, you're not a real Christian.
That's terrible.
I know, and that's how we were brought up. So
do you see what I mean? You're going back to the very beginning of what you said, sticks and stones. You were brought up with certain thoughts that you were given at growing up, your formative years, and now you've taken it into adulthood. So,
well, I have, but I'm able to use my brains to accept that the Catholics may not be necessarily right about this, but it is a pose that I love to hold. So when I say, well, you're not really a Christian, are you? Because you're not really Catholic.
You're just doing it to wind people up.
I know, and I love it.
Yes, audience, he does do that.
I love every second of it.
He doesn't actually believe it. You know that, don't you? This is Tayo on the radio. Yeah.
I love every second of it.
Oh, all right, he's a teddy bear, really. So there you go.
Oh, don't you believe it, man? Don't you believe it?
But anyway, let's get back on point.
This inflammatory speech thing. See, I get inflamed by what a lot of people say who have an opposite point of view to viewpoints that I hold. So why aren't, not that I care, but why aren't my objections, being taken care of? How can we have people who are in education? I mean, when you talk about people who say things or do things which have an impact on their work, for instance, an education czar, CZAR, an education czar here in the UK, who is of the opinion that we should introduce gender identity curricula into elementary schools, into primary schools. Now, I'd say that person's attitudes, behaviors are important. And then we found out, and I know you're going to ask me who it is, but this is like 2 years ago. And then we found out that there was some questionable material on his laptop. When I say questionable material, I mean to do with underage. Yes, exactly. And he was in schools talking about introducing identity curricula into primary schools. I mean, I see a clear correlation there
Oh,
between
indeed.
A and B. And anyway, he was tossed out,
Indeed,
from
correctly
his.
so, because that's not viable in any.
But then you have other people who take a step back from that, but I support. They say, look, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, we should be asking them what identity, what gender they identify as. And
Why do we need to do that?
I find that inflammatory, and yet it's that kind of thing. It goes down like like sweet wine down the throats of the Twitter mob, the Twitterati, and the Facebook crowd.
Mhm.
You can say stuff, you can ask questions like that, or even argue for it, but you can't turn around and argue for the opposite of it. I mean, who is it now? Do you know who's doing this now? Is it Facebook or Twitter? Who's just banned parents in a county in America, which had to do with a terrible case. I don't know if the audience is aware of this. It was a terrible case of a so-called trans student.
Oh, is this the boy who
Yes,
associated as a girl
yeah,
went into the girls' toilets and
that's right.
actually raped a girl and
Yeah,
sexually assaulted
a
her?
10-year-old girl for that matter.
Yeah.
And then the school kept it quiet. Can you imagine? I don't even, number one, how can you keep a rape quiet? I mean, is that not against the law? Shouldn't somebody be in prison
Yeah.
already? Because you should
Agreed.
report that
Agreed.
you need that is a crime that needs to be reported to the police, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Total.
And you didn't report that to the police and you're not in prison. How are you not in prison? And then what did they do? They transferred the boy, so-called boy, to another school where he went and did something else again.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
And nobody's in prison. This is what freaks me out about America.
Wasn't the father of the girl who was
sorry, the
raped?
father he was arrested. The father of the first girl of the 10-year-old, yes, because he went
to the school to protest, and he was arrested.
School PTA meeting, wasn't it,
Yeah.
or some kind of meeting?
See,
and he was arrested.
Let's stop there for a moment. Let's ask that question. Our audience listening to this now, that particular story. Now that was inflammatory, and obviously whoever put it out because it was unusual, and it doesn't sit well, and it doesn't. What I would say, the majority of people, because it was a rape. Doesn't matter who that individual associated with. It was a rape. It could have been, male on male or whatever. It was wrong. So the school to cover it up was wrong. Someone has to be held to account for that. The school in particular were wrong. It wasn't anything to do with gender identity, although that did go a bit too far, especially allowing a 17-year-old male who says he associated with females and then allowed to go into these toilets, which were girls only toilets, and then do his thing, is totally wrong. So this is where that as an entity was wrong. And it's been broadcast. The majority of people listening to this will think that was wrong and disgusting, etc. They will agree with it, and something should be done.
No,
but
sorry to
go on.
To call your attention to something, you said he went into a girl's toilet. Yes. Well, if you are living in, is it Ottawa or Alberta in Canada? One of those two. Are they states or regions? I don't really know how the Canadian.
I think they have states like
states. Is it okay? So one of those. If there's an Ottawa and Alberta, I don't remember precisely which. They are proposing. The legislature is proposing to do away with gendered public facilities throughout the state. It would be genderless.
Yeah, but the idea behind that is that you can't have more than one person in the facility.
No, hang on, you go to an airport and there's obviously you can't be waiting in a line of 1,000 people waiting for one person to go in there and come out. So you're going to have several. So yeah, there's going to have to be genderless in that particular state.
I have actually been
if it goes through
where I can't recall exactly where it was, but traveling through, I have been to a toilet facility where they were mixed, but how
did that work with urinals?
They didn't have any urinals. it was just closed doors throughout. So
You're telling me that women were were perfectly happy to walk into this place, and I don't know. I'm going to be a little bit crude here. Let it all hang out. Because,
no,
man,
that's what I mean.
I don't think a man cares, because if you're caught short and you run into a toilet and you just let it all blast, man. Hey, that's life. But women are supposed to be dainty. Women are supposed to be dainty, and they go there, and go, yay, lady, dude.
Yeah,
There's
it was
no way.
odd. There was no
There's no way.
urinals. There were no urinals at all.
No
There
way
was
women are going to agree for
sinks in the
that.
middle, obviously, all
Mm-hmm.
different sinks. There were all cubicles all the way around. So that's all you had, lots of them, and they were mixed. But what was different, there was somebody who was there stationed in the toilet, like a guard or somebody, just making sure that
The toilet
everything was,
attendant.
toilet attendant, basically. And he was there on the side. So it was quite a nice toilet, and it was well clean and looked after. So it can work if you do that. You're obviously not
I don't think it's going to
open
work at all.
urinals.
I don't think it's going to work at all. Once men start following women into the toilets, man, they're all going to be like, okay, I can't use this whilst this guy's hanging around outside because he wants to hear what's going to happen. Come on, man, you can easily tell. There's privacy. The genders naturally. You've watched kids. Have you watched children at a children's party? You don't have to say anything. A set of boys arrive, a set of girls. They're all mixed up in the beginning. If you don't actively work to keep them together, you look up, the boys will be on one side, the girls will be on another.
Yeah.
It's just natural. There's no, there's nothing about it. Anyway, what it boils down to is that guy whoever it was who was making those statements, to me, is making inflammatory statements. A lot of positions that people have today with the woke crowd is very inflammatory to me and people like me.
So what was
but I'm trying to say we shouldn't ban them any more than they should ban me. That's my point.
Yeah.
That it's not up to social media to decide who's right and who's wrong. It's not up to social media. I mean, there's social media. Why are they saying that anti-vaxxers are wrong? What do they know about the blooming thing? Like that did I send you a joke, a meme some time ago, which said if Facebook had been in operation in 1492, it would have said, don't listen to Galileo. Galileo is banned because he's going against the common knowledge, which is obviously that the Earth is the center of the universe. So the fact checker would have said, no, Copernicus. He'd have been banned. You can't be that way. You're not a freaking scientist. Even science is arguing about it right now. So, okay, when it comes to vaccinations, I believe, because I'm double vaccinated, and I wanted to. I've been invited to take my third jab. I'm going to take it because I believe in it. But I also believe that if people don't want to take the blooming thing, they don't have to, because we're supposed to be a free society.
Agreed. I'm agreeing.
We're meant to be, And why do people keep on forgetting that people died on battlefields defending these freedoms we're now throwing away?
Because it's been so long. That's the problem. It's like a lot of people now, they're armchair fighters. They want to go to war. They're quick to shout out, oh, yes, we need to go.
Let's take on China. Yeah. It's like, are you going to be in the first wave or not? That's what I want to know. Don't call for war if you're not planning on being on the first wave on the beach.
Indeed. But okay, that's freedom of speech to say that. They can say it, but they're idiots.
That's very true. No, that's very true. I agree. Yeah,
and that could be classed as inflammatory if you think about it, because they've been given the freedom to say we should invade that country. That's inflammatory.
No, I think thank you. No, I think I was wrong. Yeah, they should be allowed to say it, but we have to be allowed to oppose them and say, I hope you're willing to be on the first wave on the beach. In the first wave.
That's not opposing them stating their point of view, is it? You're just saying, okay, if you then want to implement that, then you implement it, but you.
That is how. Yeah, because I said that when you oppose people, you have to. Your idea has to go up against their idea, and may the best idea win. So in this particular case, if we're going up against China, I think that's a terrible idea. It's halfway across the world. Britain is not the superpower it used to be by any means. And you want to go and take on 1.4 billion people on their doorstep with their industry? How are you going to manage that? How many ships are you going to assemble? And they've got hypersonics, and they're really targeting shipping. Their missiles, the heavy concentration on anti-ship missiles, because they know that you have to actually land them. You can take people to Japan, 400,000 soldiers, put them on Japan as a staging post, but you still got to make it from Japan onto the Chinese mainland. So it's just a bad. I mean, we start asking questions, but you don't tell people, shut up. Don't talk about war against China. That's not how to handle it. I'm for free speech. So I'm saying people should be allowed to say. I think they're stupid for saying it, but they should be allowed to.
Well, this is your question. You shouldn't say they're stupid. They should have the freedom to say it, and then you counter them with the reasons why what they say.
Oh, hang on. I'm not trying to say people aren't stupid. Some people are stupid and they have stupid ideas. You have to call them out on it. Yeah, you shouldn't suppress them. Is what I'm saying.
I agree, but you've now fallen into the trap of calling them stupid. You should say what you said.
Oh no, that's your idea. Stupid. That's not me. No, that's your idea. Okay. I love being abusive. I mean,
well, no, that's why you.
I reveled. Yeah, whatever. I reveled. I mean,
you're not getting your freedom of speech.
Next year it'll be fine.
How you say it.
Next year it'll all be fine because Donald Trump will have his truth platform and app up and running, and I'll be able to be as abusive as I've always wanted to be. It'll be great
so
and wonderful.
You'd rather be abusive than have freedom of speech.
What?
That's what you were saying. You just said that now. I'll be as abusive as I want to be. See, This is the problem.
Because I'll be able to be on Trump's platform because they'll let me.
Yeah, but the point is, some of these, there are some social media ones. What was the one you used to be on? And it was, you left it because all it descended to was racism, because people could say what they want. Their argument didn't hold any water. And what happens when you lose an argument? You start attacking the individual. And they were using inflammatory words against you, your skin color, and your background.
No. They didn't know what my skin color was because I was anonymous. I didn't know. But what it was this. Tony, I believe Jaguar motors are better than Mercedes. I believe that Jaguar is better than Mercedes. Well, the N-word people, they like to drive. It's just like, hang on, I'm talking about blooming cars here, okay? What's he got? Everything. No matter what it was, everything descended into a race argument.
Well, this is your problem.
And I just found, look, this is boring. I'm trying to talk about cars. I'm trying to talk about a movie. I'm trying to talk about Hollywood. I'm trying to talk about whatever, rice. It's so completely innocent.
What platform were you having this conversation on? Because see, those topics,
Gab.
Right? Okay, those topics can be discussed on the traditional social media platforms, and you'll get proper answers because people are happy to talk about those sorts of things because they're not close to the mark.
Okay, evolution. Remember, I used to talk a lot about evolution. I used to argue a lot about evolution. That would invariably become, where people came from, who are closer to apes and things like that, as opposed to looking at the evidence, because I was always trying to say follow the data, which was my big thing, and it's still my big thing, follow the data. And that would inevitably descend into sort of racial.
Well, you see, this is where the problem lies, where you were saying about people being rational. Now, you gave the example earlier in the show about that Ku Klux Klan member that spoke with a black guy, and they had a civil conversation, and they met several times, and he then changed his views. Now, that's somebody who had the intelligence to understand a different viewpoint, but that doesn't mean everybody does, because once a viewpoint is entrenched, logic itself does not necessarily sway somebody.
Very much so. Well done for saying that. Yes, I agree with you completely. Yeah, I was watching or reading something. I always forget what the hell I'm doing about convincing people. It was an experiment, you see, where the global warming discussed with people. So they got a sample. They got a bunch of people together and they said, "Do you believe that climate change is caused by humans?" So some people said we do, and some people said they don't. So they gave information to both groups and then asked them afterwards, now that you've read that information, what do you think? Now, the people who believe that humans were causing global climate change,
yeah.
they were reassured by what they had read, and their belief became firmer. The people who disagreed with it just totally ignored the data. And their beliefs weren't shaken at all. And they came to the conclusion that you can't use information to change a person's mind.
No.
That was the information. So they were looking for ways and means of convincing people who were skeptical. And they said, if you can't use information, what can you use?
Well, you can, but you need so much of it. It's the example I've used on a previous episode that we spoke about. What happens is everybody starts off with this drum of paint, okay? And you can pick any color you want. You can have black paint or white paint, doesn't matter what paint's in it. It's clean, whatever it is, of a pure color. Then as soon as you get an idea that somebody's put something in there, it could be the opposite color. So if you start with a black paint, someone puts a drop of white and stirs it. Someone's got white paint, put a drop of black and stirs it. You end up with a slight shade of the original color. So it's been tarnished. Now, to get it back to its original color, do you just need a drop to go back in? So if it was black originally, it's slightly off black now. Do you need just one drop of white to turn it back? Or do you need a lot?
Yes, lots.
Yeah. The same with the human mind. Once the mind is like a unplowed field. When a new idea comes in the very first time, if you let it in because you feel that you agree with it, it creates a furrow in that field, which is that surface of your mind. And that's where the neurons are created. Now, that idea is there. Now, over time, if it doesn't get reinforced, it wanes and that trough disappears. However, if you are then partial to see other bits of information which reinforce that idea, that furrow gets deeper. So your mind is made up of all these neurons that looks like a field that's got these lines across it. Now, when new information comes in and you're going against a furrow that's already built, but you're going at right angles to it, that new information is not deep enough to make any real impact on that original furrow. You need a lot of that new information to create a new furrow that overwrites and moves that original message. And that's how the neurons work in the mind. The science has discovered that these neurons create pathways of information. So when I ask you a question, you go back to that pathway and you can recall that information. But that information is imprinted in your mind. And every time you access it, it actually reinforces it even further. So countering that information, if you then ultimately discover that that original piece of information was revised, it's now new, so you need to replace it with something else, you still go back to it because it was so entrenched. And this is the problem that people have when certain ideologies are created. They're created when you have this fertile mind of a child. And this is also the topic we just discussed, where you try and give a child information about their gender. They don't know. It hasn't been formed yet. So let them grow to a 16-year-old or however adult, and then they can look at that when some idea has been formed naturally, not something imposed onto them. So the mind is a really powerful thing, but it is impressionable based on information that's first put in that you let through into your mind, because we all have this filter of the world. But if it gets through, it creates this furrow and this pathway, and that pathway remains unless it's replaced with something else, but over and over again.
Well, I don't have much to say to that.
We're getting close to the end of the show, by the way. So it was just, as I was going back to the topic we just discussed, does logic is enough to convert someone's opinion? No. Unless it's been, you get a lot of logic, you get hundreds of pieces coming from different angles, you get it from different people explaining the same new logic, then you can take it on board. But that can work in reverse. There's obviously this situation now in China with the Uyghurs, where obviously this is what the press are
I think you need to be
reporting.
careful here. We start
Yeah, I
talking
know.
about the Uyghurs.
We don't know enough.
There we go.
All I'm going to do is explain what's been already said in the media at large. Whether it's right or wrong, I have no real opinion about it. But what has been said by the media is that the Uyghurs are being brainwashed, in a sense, in these camps. Now, I don't know enough about the subject. All I've seen is this headline. I didn't really look into it in too much detail. But they are saying that the Uyghurs are being systematically changing their viewpoints by being put in these camps where they're being brainwashed. Now, if that is true, then that is a way of changing these neurons, these pathways that are created, the simple term, the furrows in the field, by putting more and more information showing a different viewpoint in order to change that original opinion. Now, I don't know why the Chinese, if they are doing this, why they're doing it. What are they aiming to gain to change what viewpoint of the Uyghurs? Is it their religion, their faith?
Their religion.
Is it the religion, is it?
Religion.
Okay. They're trying to change their religion by forcing them to take a different viewpoint.
If that's what's going on.
If that's what's going on. We have to stipulate that. We don't yet know. There's no
the problem
real
the
evidence.
Central Committee has with the Uyghurs is they are the source of Islamic extremism in that region. So that's the problem.
Right. Okay. But we feel in the West that they're being persecuted. Is that what it is?
You're asking the wrong person. I don't know whether they are being persecuted or not, and I have my own very strong feelings about that religion anyway. So I'm the wrong person to ask because I'd be a bit unsympathetic no matter what. So,
okay. All right. Well, that we digressed a little bit there, but all it was just to make another point of people's opinions can be changed. People's viewpoint can be changed.
If true, then if it is true, but do we know if it's true? I mean,
well, with that we don't. In this case, we have no idea. But what I'm saying is, if you're bombarded with a lot of information which also shows your original viewpoint to be false or in question, then if you practice critical thinking, you can sort of think, actually, it takes a lot of vulnerability to sort of admit, actually, the information I originally thought was wrong. And that's a good trait in a way, to accept that maybe your viewpoint on a particular subject was incorrect and you've been swayed by new information that's been presented. I mean, you've done that with me, funny enough, on one of our previous shows, and I don't mind admitting it. Whereas before we spoke about reincarnation, now I wasn't somebody who believed in it because of my information that I'd been presented. But after you made your fantastic evidence and claims and showed me this information that you really have to think, how can this be disputed? Then I was able to be vulnerable and say, you know what, Tayo, you're right. I have actually changed my point of view. My original viewpoint has shifted because I now have doubt with what I was told originally. And now I'm leaning more to your viewpoint that, yes, it does seem to show that reincarnation is what goes on. Now, I still fully don't understand it, but certainly
nobody does fully. Man.
Yeah, so it is that. So people's opinions can change, but they don't like to change it because it makes them vulnerable, makes them feel wrong, and people don't want to feel wrong. So
well, then let me ask you a question.
Yeah, go on.
When you said that, don't you realize that you've just made the best possible argument that the best possible argument anybody could have. That's my phone starting up. Sorry, guys. Don't you realize you've just made the best possible arguments for me? I could have said it better myself, that people can change their minds if they're exposed to the right information. But how are you going to expose people to the right information if you don't let them have free speech? What if we were living back in the, 18th century, 17th century, where Christianity held sway? I would not have been able to tell you about reincarnation for fear, not just of being banned off Facebook but for fear of being tied to a stake and burnt alive.
Uh-huh.
Right? Which is the ultimate sanction. I mean, that's far worse than being banned by Facebook.
Which is what happens in some countries anyway. If you were then to talk against their particular religion, then you would have.
Well, yeah, if you say some things, yeah, exactly, precisely, yes. So you just made my argument for me. I think I can retire happy that you've actually made my argument for me. That free speech is just it has to be an inalienable right. It isn't, but it ought to be. And
is that your final comment? Because I'm mindful of the time.
That's my final comment. It has to be, ought to be. It isn't, but it really ought to be.
Okay, wonderful. I would love to carry on this conversation and give my viewpoint, but unfortunately, we have reached the end of the show for another week.